Today, music is a huge social and cultural phenomenon. Our playlists can reflect our emotions. We make friends with people of similar music taste. Music can motivate, relax, and concentrate. 150 years ago, this diversity didn't exist, and the credit for such development of music should be given to the invention of sound recording. The development of sound recording machines pushed music in a different direction, allowing new, undiscovered genres. The invention has spread music among places and society classes. In the 19th century, in both Europe and America, classical music was in the air of romanticism. The type of classical music held the focus on individuality and feelings. Except classical music, folklore has always been there. American folk music is a mix of many cultures, the ones brought from Europe in the 17th century, the culture of Native Americans, and the culture of enslaved people. The 1880s was the time when things settled down after the Civil War and cultures slowly started to blend. It could be strongly seen in music. While classical music was pretty much the same, music in general kept developing. Dances made music develop and not vice versa. Dancers demanded longer pieces to be able not to stop in the middle of a dance. The musicians had to come up with solos, which evolved into music genres, first ragtime and then jazz. Ragtime is pretty much the first truly American genre. It's based on long piano improvisations. It emerged in the 1890s in the southern states and quickly spread across the continent and soon reached Europe. Some of the most famous ragtime artists of the time were Scott Joplin, James Scott, and Joseph Lamb. In the 1900s in New Orleans, jazz became modern pop. It took over ragtime and mixed with it, forming the jazz we all know now. Both ragtime and jazz are based on improvisation and are meant to be played live. Despite live performance being an undoubtedly unique thing, it has a few disadvantages. First of all, there is no way to put it on repeat. Second of all, there is no way to hear all the details. And third of all, there is no way to come to such concerts every day, even if you have money. People have always tried to record sounds, starting from notation systems and music boxes and ending with modern recording studios. Invented in the 18th century, in my opinion, a music box can be deservedly called a recording or playing machine. Predating Edison's phonograph by 20 years, in 1858, Edouard Leon Scott de Martinville invented the phonautograph. It used sound vibrations to write the sound on paper. At the time, it wasn't intended to be played back, and until recently it hadn't been. The technology was a huge step at the time, but didn't become useful. It was finally played by the researchers using a 3D model of the phonogram and a virtual stylus in 2008. That's why Thomas Alva Edison is named the father of the cylinder phonograph and sound recording. The tinfoil cylinder phonograph played back the sound, and he managed to make phonograph an industry. Then Alexander Graham Bell and Charles Sumner Tainter made some improvements to the cylinder phonograph, suggesting to use wax instead of aluminium to improve the sound quality. They called their device a gramophone, which in fact was the same phonograph with wax cylinders. Edison picked up the fresh idea and started using it in his phonographs. The wax cylinder phonographs were working much better than any other machine in the past. Edison's company had competitors who also produced cylinder phonographs, Columbia, and this is what their records sounded like. Wax cylinders were great, but they couldn't be duplicated. Hence, there were as many records as there were phonographs put around the performer. Otherwise, the performer had to repeat the music piece as many times as possible. But these records were perfect for clubs and restaurants, though. In 1889, Edison hired the first ever music recordist named Theo Vangman, who had gone to Europe to record the music and brought it to the USA. In 1890, the technology went further, and Emil Berliner, one of the founders of Victor Talking Machine Company, created his enhanced version of the gramophone, which turned out completely different from Bell and Tainter's machine. He had analyzed the disadvantages of the gramophone and found out that wax was too fragile, and the records wore out very quickly. And the vertical cut in the cylinder wasn't deep enough either. Berliner soon found a solution to the replication problem, which he had also faced. He decided to make a rubber stamp of a record by squeezing a heated disc covered with rubber to the original record, that would then procedure the exact copies of the original one. The step would be called the mother matrix, and the original record would be called the master record. Later, the materials were changed to shellac and nickel instead of zinc and rubber, as it was shown in the video. Edison solved the same problem in a different way. In 1902, he invented gold-molded records. The process involves creating a form out of metal with bumps inside that would create indents in the wax, which would be poured in once it's cooled. From a single mold, around 150 records could be produced. The big difference between Edison and Victor Talking Machine Company was that while recording, Edison didn't use any kind of sound reinforcement, but Victor Talking Machine Company did. Edison thought that his way of recording was more natural. In the 1910s, Edison came up with diamond disc records, and as advertisement did tone tests. Tone tests were performances when an artist went on stage with a phonograph in the dark, and after both performances, the audience would have to guess which one was which. But the better quality of the disc records of the competitors, because they used sound reinforcement, took over. Later in the 20th century, cylinders left the market, and Edison, who was still specializing on the cylinders and prioritizing natural sound, also left the sound recording industry. The idea of improvisation is opposite to sound recording. The longest record at the time was 4 minutes, which was a disc, while cylinders could only hold up to 2 minutes. The criteria of music listening also changed, and now it had to fit both the live performance and the living room phonograph. It forced the musicians to focus on composition. Now it's difficult to imagine a song that would be longer than 3 minutes. The norms of the length of a piece changed completely. Musical instruments which sound was low, such as drums and contrabass, made the incisors on the record too deep. The needle simply jumped over the incisors without playing them, so these instruments went further from the horn or were totally excluded. Thus, the instruments that had weaker sound were put closer to the horn. It was the best place for the singer. Later, when technology improved again, the pitch of the instruments didn't matter, but the format stayed the same, about 4 minutes. Moreover, now the standard layout of a music band is having the drums in the back, piano and guitar in the middle, and the singer in front. The better the quality of the sound recordings got, the more opportunities the singer got. The singer could whisper and still be heard. I would say that the result of the inventions, especially sound recording, was the new romantic jazz, which later evolved into pop. Guys like Chet Baker and Frank Sinatra could sing in their manner just because of technology. In the 1940s, magnetic tape multi-track recordings were introduced, and musicians could be mixing and layering voices. Now, the majority of the soundtracks, pop music particularly, are built digitally. Those are meant to be listened to in the recorded form. Before sound could be reproduced by a machine, it would be listened to in a public concert or privately at home. Live performances in auditoriums were segregated from the lower society levels, too loud and unable to admire the beauty of the melody. In fact, a ticket to Jenny Lind's concert in 1850 cost almost a half an ounce of gold at the time. That is about half a monthly salary of an average person then. Jenny Lind was one of the most famous women singers in the world in the first middle of the 19th century. According to the graph with prices of gold in history, today a half an ounce of gold would be about $1,000, which even today is a lot, and can buy you a good electric guitar. But an Apple Music subscription costs only $10 a month, and you have unlimited access to any genre of any time. Even when everyone could buy themselves a phonograph, rich people in particular owned a new trendy machine. Concert halls did not stay empty. Amazingly, the value of live music kept increasing, which we can notice even now. It's still a marker of segregation. The records became a nice advertisement for the musicians. When the phonograph was invented, there was such a thing as the concert phonograph, which was a huge phonograph playing on stage. It was a way of entertainment and a way for Edison to advertise his invention. However, the machine could replace real musicians, possibly because the point of the phonograph is to make music cheaper and more accessible. The concert phonograph production ceased in 1912. After the patent of gold-molded cylinders, the popularity of cylinder phonographs only grew. The cost of a phonograph in 1898 was $20. It's more than a ticket to a concert, but it can play for twice as long as a concert, and it doesn't end before you end it. The price also depended on the model. The commercial tells us how confident Edison was about his invention. The trial part is saying that almost nobody has returned the phonograph after the trial, and with the phonograph they also sent 12 gold-molded records. As the amount of records and machines grew, partly because the mass production problem was solved, the records started to cost about 30 cents each. Further in the 20th century, when cylinders production ended, the amount of sales of the discs and new mediums such as magnetic tape was exponentially growing every decade, making music more and more accessible. The invention of sound recording became revolutionary not only for music, but also for our daily life. Music has made its way from being an expensive entertainment to being an inseparable part of our lives. The production of the latest physical music recording medium, CDs, in the year 2000 has reached 1 billion copies just in America. The number can only be compared to the production of food and clothes, and it keeps increasing for digital records. Moreover, the music recording industry now defines the musicians that will be heard and the ones who won't. Now the criteria of a good music piece are defined by the way it sounds in its recorded form. The invention of the phonograph has triggered a revolution that defined the way we treat sound as a whole.